Hear now these words. Jesus went out again beside the sea. The whole crowd gathered around him, and he taught them. As he was walking along, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were also sitting with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the scribes of the Pharisees saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When Jesus heard this, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. Here? I didn't know there were going to be so many people. My name's Levi, and I was asked to come up today and share my testimony with you. Look, let's be honest. I didn't even know what the word testimony meant until like a couple of years ago. I know what it means now. I'm on my way to work. I'm a mechanic. My daddy's a mechanic. Some of y'all might know him. I was born and raised in this area. I was born and raised around here. And I don't know who my mama is. They told me that, the second time my mama saw me after she had me, I was 2 years old. So I don't remember what she looks like. I don't know her. Never seen her. Well, I grew up with a mechanic for a daddy. He's got a big old long name, but he goes by Andy or Aldi. One of the two. He never cared. My first and earliest memories were sorting through parts. Parts to fix cars, parts, nuts and bolts that go to ratchets and all of that stuff. And I learned early on from my dad the lesson of you better get the right part. I didn't even know the names of the parts, but you better be sure that you get the right one. It's that one that you look at and that you see. Bring it to him. Bring it to me. Yes, sir. Well, those are my early memories. I eventually got old enough to where I could start school, and I'd walk to school. They told me that I had to ride the bus, though, too, because it was far enough away. Part of the shop was a house, little shack place that we stayed in behind there. So we could wake up in the morning and fix cars and go to bed at night just having fixed cars. So my next memories are of being early on in elementary school and my nickname. Has anyone had a nickname? My nickname was Monkey. Look at me, it wasn't because I was limber. My name was Monkey and they'd add the word grease in front of it. Grease Monkey. I don't even know if they knew that my name was Levi. They didn't ask. It was Grease Monkey. Don't sit next to the Grease Monkey. You're going to get grease on you. Look at his arms. Grease Monkey, don't give me a pencil. It's got grease all over it. Don't sit next to him. He's a grease monkey. You want to eat with grease on your food? That's nasty. Don't sit next to the grease monkey. I will say I got my own table early on. Nobody sat next to the grease monkey in class. Well, as mean as kids can be, and God, I don't blame them. I'd grease on me. As mean as kids can be, What I learned is that in older elementary school, I didn't get called grease monkey as much anymore. It was just kind of the assumption. You see that over there? He's unclean. Desks had parted. We all had our desks by that point. But it was just known by that time that he was unclean. When he made it to school, you knew that he had been working on cars beforehand, so he was unclean. After school, you knew that he was going to go work on cars again, so he'd be even less clean. I stink, I know. I stunk then. I did not exactly have the father who would say, "Did you clean up so you can go to school? Are you ready?" I'd go a few days without a shower or something like that. You ever come to that point where you say, "I need a shower"? Like, even I need a shower. Well, luckily you get on into middle school and high school, and there's this new opportunity once you get there that you can start kind of descending back into the shadows because it's already understood that you're unclean. So actually, I went from grease monkey to unclean to just dirty. I was that dirty kid. I'd work on being dirty because I'd work on cars. My daddy, I'd leave in the morning and he'd be underneath a car. He might be awake, he might not be. Truth be told, right? I'd get home from school and he'd be working on the cars, on these customers' cars. So once I passed 8th grade, I realized, and he realized too in a good way, that I actually knew more math than him at that point. So I moved from the back to the front of the shop. And he said, "You're going to ring up customers." So I got to know the clientele a little bit. So my after-school job, being dirty, is that the customers would come in and they'd say, "Are you charging me too much?" I'd heard that line all throughout my life. "Are you charging me too much?" Well, they started asking me, "Are you scamming me?" "No, sir, this is how much the part costs." I could take off some labor, I guess. "Yeah. I'll ring it up." So I'd ring it up. All throughout the week, every day, "I'll ring it up." "Okay, I'll ring it up." There are a lot of other auto mechanics that we can go to. We know that your daddy needs help. But we might not come back next time. Okay. Well, this went on through high school. We all got to that point where we could all start driving. And so, you parents out there, you know that when your kids get into a certain age and they can drive, you no longer have to go to the mechanic to pick up the car. You can say, "Hey, go get the car." So these people that I was in high school with, these other students, they'd come in and they'd look at their receipts and they'd say, "Are you overcharging me?" I don't know if they knew my name. "My name's Levi." I'd say no. They didn't know by then to ask for labor to be cut off. But they'd just say, "Okay, I'm going to have my mommy and daddy look at this. Mama and daddy, look at this. And you might see me again if you overcharged me." Okay? You can see how by the time you become a senior in high school, you're a little tired of that. You're a little worn out of that. And let's face it, I'm a senior in high school. I knew I wasn't going to college. So I started looking at my other options. What are your options at that point? Well, what could I do to get paid to be quiet? What could I do to be paid to be told when to talk? What could I do to be paid for someone to tell me, "You need to be clean"? What could I get paid for doing when they told me to be unclean? You see where I'm going with this? I had a really good recruiter. So that was that. After high school, I joined the military. And that recruiter, he was right. I got paid to shut up. I got paid to be loud. When I was told, say it. I won't add the rest, but say it loud. I was paid, y'all, to get dirty, really dirty. And I was paid to be clean when I needed to be clean. Maybe we have some military folk in here. Raise your hand if you're military folk. When they had to raise your hands and say, it's time to see if you're actually clean. We all know there are consequences when those fingernails are not clean, right? I was clean and I was paid for it. Well, oddly enough, I actually started getting hope in that. I actually started feeling like I might have a career in this. I was great at shutting up. I was great at yelling. I was great at being dirty. I was great at being clean. People didn't look at me as dirty or clean or anything. They just looked at me and said, you better obey. Well, I'd gotten to a point where they said, you're ready. You're ready for your tour, your first tour. So I went on a tour. I only went on one tour. We were deployed. I came back. I was safe. Well, safe. I survived, okay? Very shortly after that I survived and came back, well, let me just put it this way. I was discharged. What do? You actually felt that you were going in a direction that it was actually going somewhere. I was back to the only thing that I knew. I could work on cars. But what I mean is that I was back to the only thing I knew inside of me, which was nothing. I was surrounded by people and I felt alone. I got discharged. I was all alone. What do you do in that point? Me? I went back to the only thing that I knew. I went back to the only thing that I knew how to do, the only thing socially that I knew how to work with. I came back home. I walked into the door of the auto shop. I hadn't spoken to my dad at all. I hadn't seen him. Now, in my defense, he didn't actually send a letter either. But I walked back in, and he looked at me. And I looked at him, and his hands were all gnarled. A lot can happen in just a few years when you're gone. Arthritis had set in so bad. He was still working on cars the best that he could, but he was slower. He was losing business, of course. And he came back in, and there wasn't a, thank God you're back. I walked through the door, and I just looked at him, and I said, can I work in the back? You can work up front. He said, okay. So I was a mechanic, and a good one. That's what I knew how to do. That's the only thing I knew how to do and actually do it well and excel in. So I started working on cars. That same kind of clientele were still coming. Their kids were coming now. Their vehicles were longer. Their vehicles were bigger than what I remembered. Some of them had car seats in the back. They were breezing through and making sure things were ready for their family trips and all of that. The only advantage that I had was that, y'all, people come into the auto shop for some of the stupidest things. Actually, that's a possum under your hood. That's where that smell is coming from. But they'd come in anyways, and I had to learn the hard way at first that you don't build back clientele by telling them, that's the stupidest thing to bring this into this shop for. They won't come back. You see, you just say, okay, I'll fix it. My daddy came to a point where he was barely working anymore in the front and in the back. Well, he wasn't working in the back anymore. He'd sit up front and he'd take clients when I wasn't there because I was much faster then. I didn't feel great. I didn't feel hope. I didn't feel I had a career. But I didn't feel like that I was just going to die or something. It was just an existence. It was what it was. I wasn't Levi. I wasn't a mechanic. I was just, this is what I do. I fix parts. I fix metal. I'll never forget, though, those clientele. Because they'd come in and they had done just like their parents had taught them. You overcharged me? No. I'll take some of the labor off. Yeah. My testimony comes to this special day. It was a Saturday. I was trying so hard to close up the shop at 4:30. We close at 4:30 on Saturday if you're stopping by. I wanted so bad to get out by 4:30. It was hot. I only had 3 cars to pick up. 2 of them I knew, 1 of them I didn't know. My dad had come in and rung it up when I wasn't there. The first one, he was a pastor. He had a nice car. I didn't hold that against him, of course, right? People got to drive cars. He came in, and I'd known him a long time as a pastor. He had been a pastor in my hometown for a long time. But you want to know how I knew that he was a pastor? On the back, he had gotten a license plate cover. I'm sure it was given to him, y'all. He had this license plate cover, and on the top of it, it said, Rev. I thought it was funny. I'm sure that was a mom's day or dad's day gift or something that they said, we're going to put Rev on the back of his car. But he still had it. He wore it. He came in to me, and he was real nice to me. He was. I mean, he knew the drill. I'd keep my head down anyways. I handed him the invoice, and he said, thanks. Take care. Second client, it's kind of my typical client. He came in. Don't I know you from high school? I'd been back in town for a few years even. He'd even come to me before. Don't I know you from high school? At that point, the only thing I could say was just, nah, you don't know me. Look here. We know that you need customers. We've been helping you and your daddy for years. There are a lot of mechanics that we can go to. I just want you to know that. Yes, sir. And he took his invoice. He didn't ask me if he could take some labor off. He just took my invoice and the warning. I said, yes, sir, okay. It's 4:15 and I'm closing up shop. I just finished the last car. I'm walking back in to wipe my brow with my lucky bandana. And I hear the ding ding. I look up. This man gets out of the passenger side car door, and his wife drives off. And he walks up. And there was something different about this man. I can't explain it fully, but there was something different about this man. As he was walking up, I couldn't take my eyes off of him. That doesn't happen a lot. He comes up to the door, even though the open sign is there and it's unlocked. He knocks on the window and he waves. He's got a smile. So I just pointed over to the garage. I'll go over to the garage. So we walked over. You got to follow me here. By the time he got back, I was humbly reaching over his hood and just cranking things. I was hoping to God that he wouldn't realize that you didn't need to be up in the hood to change some brakes. But I was just wrenching like that. Underneath my hat, a hand comes out like this, and he goes, hello, sir. My name's George. And so I told him, your car's almost ready. Your brakes are looking good. I just wanted to check something up top. I heard something rattle earlier. He didn't say anything. His hand still stood there, as a hand can stand and wait. He said, hello, sir. My name's George. And then this guy that I don't even know, he flips my hat. So I had to look up. I look at his face, and there's this man there with a big old grin on his face. Not like he's overselling it or something. He had the most, what can I say, beautiful smile on his face. He said, "Hi, my name's George." So I put up my hand and I shook his hand, and he kept shaking, waiting for me, until he finally said, "What's your name?" I said, "My name's Levi." Levi? That's a good, strong name. I like that name. "Well, are you done with my car?" "Yes, sir, I'm done with your car. Your brakes are good." "Okay." He stopped shaking my hand, and he went back around to the front, and I went up to the register, and I rung it up, and I rung out the invoice, and I pushed over the invoice, and he looked at it, and he said, "This looks good." Folded it up, put it in his pocket. "Levi, it was good to see you. We're not new to the area. We actually have lived here our whole lives, but we're finding a new mechanic." Okay. So I sit back down at the register. He turns around and walks out. But when he gets to the back of the door, he pauses, and he does this about face, just like this. He walks back up to the register, and he said, "Levi, what are you doing tonight?" "Well, I'll have to check my calendar, but I'm a very busy man in my social nightlife." That's what I'm thinking in my head sarcastically. But what did I do every night? I cleaned my tools. I went to bed so I could get up in the morning and make sure that I could work on cars. But I told him, I lied to him. I said, "Nothing. I'm busy." He said, "Well, on Saturdays, my wife and I go to this place. And when you walk in, there are these people who are nice. When you walk in, they want to shake your hand, I guess. And you don't have to shake their hand if that's not your thing. But we have snacks, and they're good snacks. We had cheese sticks last week. They were good." I'm sitting here receiving all of this, and he's like, "Okay, so you come in, and there are these kids, and man, they're good musicians. They're passionate about what they're doing. And I mean, it's good to see kids that have passion, right?" I'm thinking in my head, yeah, I guess I've never seen that before. I don't know what a church is. I've never been to a church. I quickly caught on that he was inviting me to church. He didn't say the name, but he was saying, like, there's this place, and they do this music and stuff, and then this guy, he gets up sometimes, this woman gets up, and they might read a piece of scripture, and then they'll kind of talk about it. But I got to tell you, it's really laid back. It's really easy. It's just laid back. I want to warn you, though, that whenever you walk in, there's going to be people that are going to talk to you, but you don't have to talk back. You don't have to say a single word back if you don't want to. If you're coming with me, then you can just stand behind me, and we'll just go find our seats in the back. I later realized that George sat in the back not so he could remain anonymous. He sat in the back so he could jump to his feet and hug anyone who came in the door at any time of the service. Well, I told him no. I'm all right. I'm going to do other things this Saturday night. And he paused and he said, "Okay, Levi, it was good talking with you." And then he stopped on his way out and he turned around again and he said, "Well, if you don't know where it's at, my wife and I, you know what my car looks like. She and I will come back at 5:15 and we'll give you a ride there." Are these people trying to murder me? Like, I don't know these people. Are they trying to murder me? Do they want to drive me out into the desert and take my life? I didn't cheat them. He sucked the words back into his mouth and he said, "Yeah, creepy, I know. I'm sorry. Scratch that." He said, "How about this? You know what my car looks like. My wife and I will come up at 5:15, and if you want, you can get in your car, and you can follow us. That way you can leave at any time you want." And he looked me straight in the eyes. And he said, "Will you follow me?" All I could say at that point was, "Yeah. Okay, I'll follow you." They kept their word. They got it there at 5:15, and I hopped into my car, and I followed them to the place that they said that they were going to on a Saturday night. We didn't have cheese sticks. Like cheese sticks, we had these awesome little Smokies, you know what I'm talking about? They were good. But I went over, and people talked to me. He was right, they were greeting me. They had smiles on their faces. They were greeting me. I just went over and I grabbed some snacks, and George said, "Hey, I set my Bible down over there. Just go sit next to it." He was like almost whispering to me. So I sat down in the back. at that point, people realized that I didn't want to be talked to. So they just kept on kind of filing in, not in a mean way, but just filing in, getting ready for service. And he was right. These kids got up there, and they started singing, and they started praising. That's a word I've learned in the last couple of years. They started praising. They were rocking out on their guitars. They were playing in rhythm, out of rhythm, on top of rhythm, all over rhythm with their guitars and their hand percussion, and they were awesome. And I say awesome in that true sense because I started feeling something a little bit different in me, just through music. George was singing at the top of his lungs. I was mumbling at the bottom of my lungs because I didn't know any of the words to the songs. But he said, it's okay, you'll learn them. Sure enough, they got up, and there was this time he leaned over and he said, now this person's going to get up and they're going to say a prayer. That's what's coming next. So we all bowed our heads and right? They were bowing their heads. So I sat there. It wasn't uncomfortable, but I just sat there. I stood up when they stood up, and I sat down when they sat down. This guy got up, and he started talking about the scripture that had been read. I didn't understand all of his words. I understand a few more words now, but I didn't understand his words. I got the message. It was like to be happy and all of that, like that you want to get in a message, I guess, but I didn't understand all the words that he used. So after that, after the song was over, the final song, George, he leaned over and he elbowed me. And he grinned his big grin and he said, I'm glad you stayed. See, I told you. That wasn't so bad, was it? I told him no. He said, hey, you want to come next week? My wife and I will come at 5:15 and you can follow us. You want to come? Sure. So we're walking out of the service. One of the kids from the band, he realized, he's a hugger, he realized that he hadn't hugged one person in the fellowship hall yet. So as I'm walking out, he comes bombing up to the front. He says, hey, I couldn't push him away or tell him not to give me a hug. He just said, hey, I'm Mel. And he jumped back real quick. And he looked down at my hands. He said, dude, hold out your hands. Folks, this was that moment of dread. Do you know what I had to show him? I had to show him grease-soaked fingernails, dirty arms, all of that. This was that moment where it was, well, this was my first and last time at this place. But I held out my hands. And he looked down. He put his hands on his hips. And he goes, you got guitar hands, man. He said, your fingers are long, man. You're a mechanic. Your fingers are strong, man, huh? Right? Like he's like coaching me into this conversation. I don't know him from Adam. He didn't ask my name, but he said, you have guitar hands. Folks, I had guitar hands. I'd never known that before. George elbowed me. He said, come on, let's go. On the way out, Mel said, if you come next week, come a little bit early and I'll show you your first chord. He was persistent. I didn't even say yes or no. I had already made up my mind that I knew that I was coming back the next week. But that's my journey that I started with Mel, because I have guitar hands. On the way out back to the parking lot, George tells me, I just want to let you know there's so much that goes on, just not on a Saturday night, you know, like here at this place. There's stuff going on all the time. Our pastors, they're always talking about how busy they are. It's funny, because we got to help them too, of course, right? Well, here, I'll show you sometime. If you want to come sometime, I go to this Bible study. And just come, just sit in the back. See if like anything makes sense to you. Ask me if it doesn't make sense. That's okay too. Well, when I met him, because I followed his car, he didn't tell me that he was leading the Bible study. But that's what he did. Outside of that place on Saturday nights, during the week, he led a Bible study. And so I started going. And I met these other people who were there. And they wanted to know who I was. They didn't ask me where I'd been, where I was going, what was underneath my fingernails. They just wanted to get to know me. We'd talk about things that I didn't understand. I'd never read a Bible before or anything like that. We would just talk about what was going on in their lives and their families. We'd talk about God. I got to actually know my gospel and things like that through just simple Bible studies of go home and read this chapter. Circle the words that you don't get, and George will tell you. Well, that's my testimony. I just started coming. I kept coming back. What I realize now is that message that I started learning about this person, Jesus, was that in the eyes of others, that I'd known my entire life, in the eyes of others, they were always going to think that I was unclean. They were always going to think that I was dirty. They were always going to think that. Nothing I could ever do would change their opinion of me because they'd known me forever. But what I also learned about this person, Jesus, is that the real message of what he was saying to you, is that, of course, you're unclean and broken. Not the way that they think. I'm not talking about they're unclean, but that's why I'm here. With me, through me, and learning about me, even if you don't get it, I want you to know that I will make you clean. That's the message that those people didn't hear. That's the message that in coming to this place, I got to hear. I heard that there were people who loved me. They knew me as a Jesus person, as a Jesus follower, as a mechanic. So this person, George, he served me. I let him serve me. I don't know why. Mel, he served me, and I let him serve me because I have guitar hands. George, he said, you're not a half-bad singer. You got a voice. Did you know that? No. What do you like to sing? What I sing? I sing Hank. I sing Johnny Cash. That's what I sing. That's what I know. That's what's on my radio. Well, they were right. I started learning those words to the songs. And what I realized, and what they helped me realize, is that I do have guitar hands. You see, God wanted to talk with me through music. And so that's how I started singing. There were these people at this place that even though I was always struggling with cars and all of that, they actually started teaching me how to sing at no charge. They served me that way because they saw potential in God, saying, you got God hands. You got guitar hands because you have God hands. That's my guitar. When I could afford it, I bought a guitar. Mel was so happy. And so I came to a point in my testimony where all I could say was, I feel that God's using me with music. I feel that God wants me to share with music. My God wants me to serve with music. And so I thought, Joe can do it. You spent more money than I did on how to do it, right? Does anyone know this guy's credentials to be here? I do. But that's because he started teaching me how to sing. They gave me the confidence to say, you can do this too. You're called to do this. Did you know that? So I thought, well, for my first song, I'd write a song about Levi. I'm Levi. Now the name of the song, it's a real simple one. It's called And Yet He Called Me. My pants don't fit. I lay underneath cars all day. They get stretched out. I'm not as nervous right now. Seemed to know who I was, and yet He called me. I know who I am, still I went. He didn't mind that as I am despised. It was of little consequence as I looked into His eyes. And to this day I don't know why I first followed Him. Sometimes your heart leads you before your legs. Compassion and fear of the uncertainty almost overwhelmed me, but through all of this, He still called me. Come gather around you at my table. My honored guest has a spot for you. He doesn't read you through those Pharisaic eyes. He just wants you to know that you are His Father's bride. I simply had a hunger in my heart, and I can see that now. He quenched the thirst I was not aware I had. He liberated me from an empty prison which had no doors. And through all of this, and to this day I don't know why I first followed Him. Sometimes your heart leads you before your legs. Compassion and fear of the uncertain, it beset me. And through all of this, but through all of this, yet He called me. He still called me.